Hello again, everybody. Welcome into Gamecock Central Radio. Emerson Phillips joined by Wes Mitchell. And Wes, we've got some interesting developments with recruiting Gamecock football as we get ready for this game with the Citadel on Saturday. Somewhat in a limbo period right now with the uncertainty with the head coaching position, and we understand that a number of recruiting visits that were scheduled to take place last weekend have been rescheduled. So talk about the coaching situation right now, and specifically as it pertains to recruiting. Where do the Gamecocks stand with kids that have already committed, and how is the staff going about trying to secure more commitments right now? You know, Fox Sports ran a report last weekend saying that there had been some type of directive handed down to the coaches not to offer any more scholarships for the upcoming signing period. So what do you make of all this, Wes?
Yeah, it is kind of interesting. South Carolina has continued certainly to recruit the guys that are already committed, and certainly the guys that are upperclassmen that are coming up in the state of South Carolina, and even out-of-state guys that are underclassmen that it's already pretty clear they're pretty good players that are interested in South Carolina. So, I think from that report, it's easy to maybe read it if you're a fan out there and say, well, South Carolina's not recruiting anymore. That's certainly not the case. They had actually their biggest group of the entire season was in this past week for the Florida game on all unofficial visits. And, what you saw kind of referencing there, them pushing back, some visits. I think Dre Massey was kind of the one that caught a lot of people's attention. The kid who's originally out of Malden was a just dynamic high school football player. They've pushed his official visit back to December with the primary reason of being there would be a better chance that he would possibly be able to meet the coach, but at the very least be able to possibly know who the coach is that he might play for. So, I think that's a smart move. I think that's a frankly, probably a pretty respectful move for the future coach, whoever that may be, and for the kids. This staff is currently still recruiting guys very, very hard to the university, but at the same time, everyone knows that no one knows exactly who the next coach will be.
So is recruiting somewhat on hold until the next head coach is named, Wes? I have to believe that the Gamecock staff is still working on recruiting. They're still talking to kids. We've heard recruits talk about the fact that they're still hearing weekly, sometimes daily, from Gamecock assistant coaches. But do you think it's possible that the staff is simply not offering scholarships at this point until a new head coach is in place?
They did accept a commitment from a kid out of Alabama, Griffin Gentry, not too long ago. From the best I can tell, I believe this is a situation where, if a no-brainer kid want it just up and say, I want to go to South Carolina, and this is a guy that it's pretty easily known that this guy's a player, I still wouldn't see South Carolina turning someone like that down. But really, if you look at our updates on a lot of the kids, most of the kids are kind of in a holding pattern themselves. Not necessarily that South Carolina is doing it or telling them to, but they personally just it makes sense that they want to wait and see. No parent necessarily wants to send their kid somewhere where they don't know who's going to be running the program. And no kid, if you're an offensive player, you want to know what type of offensive scheme is going to be run and how you're going to be used. If you're a defensive player, you want to know what position you're wanted at and how you're going to be used as well. So, I think most of the recruits themselves are kind of in a holding pattern. It's been interesting. South Carolina's actually been able to hold on to most of their committed guys. Now, I think they're all kind of rightfully so looking around a little bit and saying, what is a possible backup plan? What's a possible alternative plan? Where do I go if I just don't fit with South Carolina's new staff or new scheme? I think that's something any high school player at that level has got to do. But for the most part, you see a Brandon McElwain, you see a Brian Edwards, you see these guys that are highly recruited who have actually stuck around and stayed in South Carolina's recruiting class.
I did see that McElwain earlier this week said that he would like to see G.A. Mangus remain on the staff, and that's going to be something that's important to him. So how important is McElwain to the 2016 Gamecock class, and what's the likelihood that G.A. Mangus might be retained by the next head coach?
I've been a big supporter of the idea of keeping G.A. Mangus on staff. I think even with the way the offense was kind of I guess stymied against Florida this past week. I think that's the best defense South Carolina's faced all year long, and I think it was just clear the difference in talent from South Carolina's offense and Florida's defense. So I didn't put a whole lot of stock into that. Otherwise, you look at what G.A. Mangus has done on the field since he's got an opportunity to run the offense. You've seen the offense be a bit more explosive. You've seen the yards per game, especially before that Florida game, go up. You've seen what he can do when he gets an opportunity to actually design the offensive game plan himself. So when I say I'm a fan of G.A. Mangus staying, it's not even, McElwain is certainly a nice feather in his cap, but I think this is a guy who's an excellent football coach, an excellent offensive mind, and someone that actually, kind of ironically, because Spurrier's always kind of been a mentor to G.A. Mangus, but I think in some ways Spurrier has kind of kept Mangus from being able to show exactly what he's capable of doing. So, I think you look at him on the field, there's a lot to like about G.A. Mangus, and you look at him recruiting-wise, he's a guy that gets after it, and, if you want to keep McElwain around, I'm not saying that Mangus has to be there for McElwain to be there, because there's a lot of different things that drew McElwain to South Carolina. He's a legacy recruit. I think he's pictured himself being South Carolina's quarterback for a long time, but it certainly would help that transition, I think. And you know what? I think it's been kind of a thought process from our members there on the Gamecock Central message boards that, okay, if it ends up being Kirby Smart, being a defensive guy, maybe there's a better chance that someone like Mangus would stick around, whereas with Herman, he's got his own offense, his own scheme, probably his own idea for offensive coaches. Maybe the opportunity is a little bit less there, but I actually, from what I've read and watched of Herman and what I know of G.A. Mangus here personally, I think those are two guys that would very much click in their mindsets to the game, their mindsets to recruiting. So, this is all a lot of speculation on my part, because there's no way to truly know what a Tom Herman or a Kirby Smart would want to do, what direction they want to go as far as that goes. But I'm just saying I could make a very, very compelling case, I think, for why G.A. Mangus should stick around with the next staff.
McElwain said flat out that he would like to see Mangus remain on the staff regardless of who the next head football coach is at South Carolina. So this is Gamecock Central Radio. Emerson Phillips with Wes Mitchell. You can get breaking Gamecock news alerts delivered to your email inbox. Just text USC to 42828. All you got to do is text USC to 42828 or go to the Gamecock Central homepage for more information. Wes, let's talk about a couple of other prospects here. C.J. Freeman is a running back out of Greensboro, North Carolina. He is a Gamecock commit, but he announced this week that he's going to explore other options. He's got visits planned to Wisconsin and Louisville, and you mentioned that a lot of these Gamecock commits are kind of in a holding pattern right now, so this limbo period for Gamecock football is a cause for concern, particularly as it pertains to recruiting.
Yeah, absolutely. CJ's a kid that was primarily a South Carolina-Virginia Tech battle initially before he committed to South Carolina. Ironically, both of those schools are going to have a new coach next year, so kind of interesting there. You look at Wisconsin, that's a school that has always put out running backs, has always recruited the running back position well. So I think, for one, it kind of speaks to C.J. Freeman's ability as a player. But as far as him particularly and where his mindset is, I think he's a guy that's always been pretty strongly committed to South Carolina, but it's just very, very hard to predict what a kid will do when you have so much ammo for an opposing team like a Wisconsin to say, look, this is our staff. This is who's going to be here. This guy's going to be your position coach. That's a lot of ammo. So I try not to get into prediction business prior to an official visit, because I know Wisconsin's going to have a great story to sell to C.J. Freeman. But at the same time, it's also a lot further away, and it's a lot colder up there. So that's something he's going to take into account as well, I'm sure. But again, I think it's just going to come down to with a guy like him, what offense is South Carolina going to run? If it's Tom Herman, he might be a spread guy, but Tom Herman runs the football about as much as anybody that spreads it out the way they do. So, I think it'll be very interesting. I do believe the very first step you take if you're the new coach, whether you're Tom Herman, Kirby Smart, or someone completely out of nowhere that we're not even talking about, the first thing you're going to do is sit down, I think, and evaluate the guys that are already on that commitment list, introduce yourself to all of them, and say, hey, and watch some film, and then you're going to start to say, hey, here's a guy we really like. We need to find a way to keep him. Or actually, if we're being completely honest, there may be a couple of guys on that list that are looking around that the new staff might say, you know what, if they still want to come, we're going to acknowledge their commitment and take them. But if they want to look at other schools, maybe they don't necessarily fit what we're going to do anyway. Let them go take visits somewhere else.
Gamecock Central Radio here. We've got new smartphone apps available. The new Android app is out now. All you got to do is search Gamecock Central Radio. And the new iPhone app is now available as well. And we're on iTunes. Just search Gamecock Central Radio. Emerson Phillips with Wes Mitchell. Wes, you talked earlier about Dre Massey, an in-state product. You mentioned that Dre played at Malden High, and he was an electrifying high school player. I believe he had 60 touchdowns his final year at Malden High, and he's gone the JUCO route, and it looks like the Gamecocks have offered him. Clemson has recently offered him, and I'm wondering if the Gamecocks are able to land a player like Dre Massey. And another kid comes to mind too, Wes, and that's Tremel Terry, the kid from Goose Creek High that went to Georgia to play running back, and then he got moved to defense, and he was injured. He hadn't seen a lot of playing time in Athens, and there's talk that Tremel Terry might transfer, and South Carolina is one of the schools that could potentially be at the top of his list. So if the Gamecocks were able to land Dre Massey and Tremel Terry, do you think these are players that could come in and contribute right away? You know, we're looking at a Gamecock offense that's going to lose Brandon Wilds. In all likelihood, Pharaoh Cooper will go pro at the end of this year. Brandon Shell, the top lineman, moving on. Jarrell Adams will be done this year. Sean Carson is gone. You know, we're looking at the Gamecock offense for next year, and it looks like the Gamecocks need some young, new faces that can come in and play right away. Do you think Dre Massey and or Tremel Terry could do that?
Yeah, I certainly think Dre Massey. I think regardless of who the new coach is, we all know the trend in college football is to go to these, spread them out. Simplify for the quarterback, simplify for the wide receivers, get your playmakers in space. I think Dre Massey is a perfect fit for that. I think, first of all, a perfect fit for Tom Herman's system. You look at how he uses the Avery kid, whose first name has escaped me, that's number 10 for Houston, puts him in the slot, gets him in space, use them in the return game. You look at that, I think Massey is an absolute perfect fit and really the type of playmaker that South Carolina needs more of. Even if they were to find a way to keep Pharaoh Cooper around, because I haven't heard yet where his head completely is on, possibly the idea of returning. I think, he's going to have a decision to make as well. But either way, Carolina needs more playmakers on offense. I look at Massey, and even, you mentioned Brandon Wilds leaving. I think Massey's a guy who could play running back for South Carolina. He's that dynamic in the open field that he's someone you find a way to get out there, to get involved. So, I think Tremel Terry is an intriguing prospect. I think he's someone you certainly take a look at. And I always think it makes sense to bring someone back that maybe thought the grass was greener on the other side.
Yeah.
And then maybe found out it wasn't. Of course, talking about an in-state prospect who had in-state offers but went out of state. I think from a perception standpoint, it never helps to have a guy like that come back home and do well. You've seen it on the basketball side, with people like Devin Downey. So Zam Frederick, I think that's something that would be worth it, not just on the field, but off the field for South Carolina.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit of a sure thing on Dre Massey. I think you take a Tremel Terry, and it of course, is going to depend on what the next staff wants to do. Tremel wants to take an official visit to South Carolina, I understand. But yeah, Emerson, I think when you're looking to upgrade, you got to bring in a Dre Massey, and you've got to maybe take a chance on a Tremel Terry.
It'll be interesting to see if the Gamecocks make Massey and Terry priorities in the coming weeks and months as we look forward to signing day 2016. That'll be in early February. And Terry was Mr. Football in South Carolina in 2013 at Goose Creek High. and was recruited heavily by South Carolina when he was at Goose Creek, but he opted to go to Georgia. Things have not necessarily panned out there the way he would have liked them to, so he is considering a transfer. And it looks like Terry's going to be moving somewhere, so a couple of names to keep an eye on as we move forward. Dre Massey from Malden, Tramel Terry from Goose Creek. Wes, with the coaching search, is there any new information there? Is it still Herman 1A, Smart 1B? That's what's being widely speculated at this point.
Yeah, I believe, it's been interesting how much just stuff has circulated. It's kind of hard to separate, I think, what's real, what's rumor. But it does seem like it's safe to say that Herman's 1, Smart is 2, or 1A, 1B, as you said. I think that's still the case. I think the biggest maybe news from yesterday, the most latest thing would be the Houston Chronicle report, about how Houston is going to do everything they can. They've started the process of trying to keep Tom Herman with their Board of Regents meeting on Thursday to approve. I got the wording right here. They're going to delegate authority to the chancellor to negotiate and execute an amendment to the contract of the head football coach at the University of Houston, which essentially means they're going to try to pay him some more money now as opposed to later, I think. I really think while that's something that is, newsworthy in the parameters of the search, I don't think it's really alarming or surprising or something for South Carolina fans to worry about, because we already knew Houston was going to try to make a major run at keeping Tom Herman. You get the sense that they're just frankly tired of, Art Briles leaving to go have success at Baylor, Kevin Sumlin leaving for the, Texas A&M job. They want to try to find a way to build up that program and get into a Power 5 conference. So, they're going to try to do everything they can. But, if you look at the numbers of Herman's contract, he's making $1.35 million a year right now. Even if Houston were to just straight double that to $2.7 million, everything we've heard has been that Ray Tanner has the complete and full support of, the university, the Board of Trustees. Everybody that needs to be on board with him to go out and spend some money is on board. So $2.7 million, again, like I said, that's twice his current salary. There's no way that is going to be something that deters South Carolina from going and getting Tom Herman. If I'm Herman, and I know I'm one of the hottest young names in coaching right now, there's no way I'm signing a contract during the season that locks me in any way, shape, or form to what Houston's doing. Because I think Herman, not even looking at this from a South Carolina perspective, Herman at least owes it to himself to see how big his name is, to see what he's worth to a bunch of schools, to see what the possibilities are. So, I think this is Houston doing what they got to do, clearly, but I don't think it's a big thing for South Carolina fans to worry about, because it was completely and entirely expected.
All right, Houston media reported yesterday that $2.25 million is about as high as Houston University figures to go for a pay increase for Tom Herman, and I don't have any idea how much interest Tom Herman might have in the South Carolina job, but I do know this, Wes. This is an undefeated Houston team this year. They had 30,000 fans at their last home game, and the Gamecocks have had 30,000 for the spring game in recent years. So I think that kind of gives you an idea of where these two programs are. And if you are an up-and-coming coach, which Tom Herman certainly is, you really have to strike while the iron is hot. His name is hot right now, and I would think that South Carolina might be a job that's very appealing to a coach like Tom Herman. So Kirby Smart still very much a factor. Any other names at all, or is it going to be one of those two, do you think, Wes? Herman or Smart?
Unless Ray Tanner's a savvy dude. Unless Ray Tanner just has some name in the back of his pocket that is way, behind the scenes, I have a hard time, unless there's mass chaos and this job opens that leads to this job, to this job, to this job, and, just stuff that is impossible to predict. As we sit right here today, have a hard time seeing it getting past, those two names, because we already know for a fact that Kirby Smart is very, very interested in South Carolina, and that South Carolina really, really likes Kirby Smart. So you put those two things together, even if it got past to Tom Herman, would be very difficult to see it getting past, a Kirby Smart.
Okay, Wes, last question here. If it is Herman or Smart, we know Houston's unbeaten. They're going to be playing in a big bowl game, likely around New Year's Day. And if Bama wins out, they're going to be in a playoff. If it's Houston or Smart that gets the South Carolina job, will they take that job in early December and go ahead and come to Columbia to get the wheels turning on the recruiting cycle for 2016? They'll have bowl games, big games coming up with their current jobs. Do you think they'll leave and come to South Carolina so they go ahead and get started right away?
That's going to be interesting to see. I think, if it were Kirby Smart, ironically, the precedent may have been set last year by Tom Herman, who was an offensive coordinator at Ohio State and playing in the college football playoff. So if it's Smart and Alabama is in a bowl, then I think that if it's just a regular bowl, I think if you're Smart, you go ahead and leave. If Alabama is in the college football playoff, then I think what you do if you're South Carolina and you're Kirby Smart, you go ahead and announce Kirby Smart as your next head coach. That way at least recruits know.
Okay.
And then you would expect Kirby Smart to coach through the college football playoff, because that's what Herman did last year. It was announced. I went back and looked. It was announced early to mid-December. It was announced Herman was Houston's next coach, but it was also announced that he would coach with Ohio State until they were eliminated from the playoff, which I think is what you want. Who wants a coach that is going to leave his team that's about to possibly play for a national title? I think bowl games are a little bit different. And I don't really know if I would want to speculate on what Herman's thoughts on that would be, because he may, being a one-year coach, it may be important to him that he coaches the bowl with his team if it's a New Year's Day, New Year's Eve type bowl. Otherwise, it might not be as big of a deal for him. So there's going to be a lot. We know who's 1 and 2. At least we think we know who's 1 and 2. But the intriguing thing that's going to be hard to predict is how just the actual logistics of this thing play out down the stretch, and how that affects the ultimate decision.
Right. How will the transition take place? There are a lot of factors at play here, and it's going to be interesting to see, exactly how it plays out. So good stuff today, Wes. Enjoy talking Gamecock football with you. Gamecock fans, I think a little bit trepidatious right now, a little bit apprehensive about, uncertain times that we're treading through right now. But Ray Tanner has stated flatly that he would like to have a coach in place hopefully early to mid-December so that the new staff can be assembled and then have several weeks to go ahead and get to work full-time on recruiting for this immediate class that's coming up, the 2016 class, with signing day in early February. So if it's Herman or if it's Smart, how will the bowl season affect their plans, and how will that affect Ray Tanner's decision? It's going to be interesting to see. Wes, thanks for your time. Great talking with you today.
All right, Emerson. Have a good one, man. Appreciate it.
All right, Wes Mitchell from Gamecock Central, and I'm Emerson Phillips, and we appreciate you joining us here on Gamecock Central Radio.